Hello campers! Today I plan to talk to you about... Yes, that place where workflows go to die. Latent space. Now you have asked for some heads up in the start section, so what I plan to discuss is DOT scaling, detailing an existing 32-second clip using latent space, and what I discovered by taking this approach. There is much to learn, and this will be the first video on that subject. I also plan to discuss using Vase 2.2 and WAN 2.2 to extend videos instead of the method I showed using Skyreels last time, but I will explain why I won't be doing that, at least not anytime soon. In fact, let's start with that discussion. And the video you are looking at is from my Naked Disco video, where I green screen myself into a load of movies, then use Comfy UA to muck about with it. And why this bit is relevant is because latent space is a bit of a secret society where knowledge about it is hard to find, and I think you have to give the correct Vasonic handshake to get some. But fear not. Yes, I venture fearlessly into the dark halls full of naked ladies dressed in not very much, with nothing to guide you but raw instinct, and whatever I discover there I will share with you, or probably better if I don't. But one such thing I discovered of use is in this latent space workflow, and I will of course make it available via the website as always, but let me first show you what it did, and to do that we must first look at the video I made last time using Skyreels to extend a video clip, and that created this 32-second clip which we are looking at. And yes, the quality was poor, the seams were obvious, and it's clear it could all be done a lot better. If you recall, in the last video I explained that I work to current limitations, and as such doing this would not be considered the finished item or a stage along the way. Let us talk now about the next stage. And what you see here is the result of running the 32-second clip through a latent space workflow using Phantom T2V to drive it, and upscaling what was original 480p to what you see here, which is 720p. I had to keep the denoise to a very humble 0.1, so the results may not be obvious at first, but let's just run through that one more time so you can have a closer look before we analyse it further. Hopefully YouTube won't have destroyed the quality too much, such as it is, and if it has, I will share a link to a better version in the text. So this is the 720p latent space, upscale and detailed low denoise result. I combined the clips using DaVinci Resolve and a convenient 17-frame crossover that allowed for better scene blending. There are of course still glaring issues, but it was an interesting step, and one I had not taken before, and I will be exploring it further in the future. I ran into a number of problems, as I said, received very little help, which was weird, because I know several people know how to work in latent space, but either I have upset them, or more likely, they use it in their work, and don't want to give away their highest level of skills. I am starting to notice a certain level of reticence in some people who have achieved greatness in this regard. I guess it is to be expected, money is hard to come by in this game. But let's get on and discuss the merits and issues of this latent space workflow. As always, we begin with the model loading section, and as I redo, I can tell you that this is the first workflow that I built myself from scratch, because I could not find a damn thing about latent space out there to guide me. Mysterious. Or is it that no one really knows how to work with it either? I don't know. But to the model section, and give me any old excuse to throw in a phantom model, and I will. So I did. You could of course use any T2V model here, and arguably I2V, but I wouldn't. T2V is known for its use in the upscale / detailing method, so I stick to it. Next we have here the new T5 text encoder cached node. Cached being the operative word. And if you saw my post and recent update, there was info on that in the memory management section of the research page on my website. Some Reddit user got quite irate about my recent post on this, but we'll leave that for now. I think I put them straight.
This part shows the main sampler, and the denoise setting is at 0.1. I tried a variety of samplers here, including K-Sampler and Clown Shark Sampler. The weird thing was that all of them produced terrible results, but for this one. Now, if you go and try to get this working and successfully do so in a native workflow using a different sampler, I would like to hear about it, because nothing I did could seem to get anything better than this quality in other samplers when I ran it through the workflow.
As I said, no one seemed to want to talk about latent space much. Now, the bypass nodes you see there are a way for me to load up saved latent files, and this is where things get not only quite cunning, but quite tricky. It's easy enough to use, but not so easy to understand what is going on. Let me just get a screenshot of this section when it isn't bypassed and use it to discuss what little I understand about latent space. So double check anything I hear next, as I might be misinformed, and feel free to post comments if you have knowledge on this stuff. What I do know is that for every image frame you get 4 latent space frames. I don't know what that looks like, only that we have to allow for it. Now, what you might have noticed there is the get latent size and count node, and that is what I use to try to gain information about what is going on with my latent files and images. How I got to this point, I will show now. I basically took 120 frames from the video I showed you earlier and pushed it through a resizer to make it 1280 by 720. Each run took about 10 minutes. I then used VAE encoding node to turn that into latent space, and you will notice that I unchecked tiling, so it isn't being further tiled at that stage. VAE encoding and decoding is what switches between images we are familiar with and latent space. From the VAE encoder, I sent the result to the save latent node and saved it out to a .latent file. I did this in stages using 100 frame section, as you can see, where I am loading in the video in this screenshot starting at frame number 500. This method of running 120 image frames while stepping only through 100 frames per turn is what ended up giving me 17 frames to overlay, which was purely guesswork on my part, but it worked out well in the end. I think I am losing some frames in the process, but since I account for the overlay, it didn't matter. So back to the latent file loading section, and here you see loading up what was 120 images encoded to latent space and saved out to a latent file. Here I then load it up again, but ready to send it to the sampler. You can't see it in this screenshot, but plugged into the get latent range from batch node is the 120 frame set node, and that is going into the number of frames section for that node. So this is in theory loading at 120 frames. And this is where I got a bit confused, because is that loading at 120 images or 120 times 4 latent images? I have no idea. So I plugged that get latent size and count node in, trying to find out, and got 30 frames at 98 and 160 width. Cool information. So how does that work out? Well, 30 frames is easy enough. I just times that by 4 and I have my image frame count, and that would be 120. But why is the height and width divisible by 8 and not 4? Right now, I don't know. Maybe you can tell either. Now let's talk about the big bypass section, and I left it in because this entire process was supposed to be automated to happen in one run. So I get the damn automation working? No, I could not, and this was when I discovered the secret society of latent space and how they just don't want to part with knowledge. And I did ask. Yeah, quite directly in fact, and ghosted. Oh well. I will work it out, but for now you get the manual version, which is where you run it manually for 120 frames, move your video on 100 frames, and run it again, all while saving out to latent space files. Now, there is lots more I could say about all of this, but I think that will do for today. Instead, let me turn to look at the results a little more closely, and then, as promised, explain why I won't be using VACE 2.2 with WEN 2.2, despite the fact I have seen near-perfect results coming from it. So, let's compare original video clips with latent space upscale and detailed video clips if I ran through this workflow. Let's watch the original first and look at the 8x2x 480 blemishes as we do. I'll zoomed in 2.5 so we can see the issue a little closer. The first thing I will say is we are not going for a massive fix. Why? Because too much gets changed if we do, and you will immediately get jarring effect on the seams as stuff will look differently structured. I found 0.1 to be the sweet point for denoise in this workflow, where it didn't change too much, but sort of reified the result a bit. It is a delicate balance. Now let's look at it after the 12-inch Sierra 720 Phantom T2V low denoise pass, done using latent space, where normally I would pass clips through the USD UGAR scaler without bothering, but that would discolor and degrade too much. This way I'm able to blend the previous seams in a bit, and that might not be 100% solution, but is something. As you can see, or not, the changes are subtle, but they are real. And I will prove that to you using still shots in just a moment. What I like to think I have done here is show that latent space is the place to be working and looking. There were also memory consideration, and I could probably even risk pushing to 1080p, but this was the first test. I will start to think about saving everything out to latent space in the future and how to manage that, because one of the problems we have with degradation occurs in the VAE encoding and decoding stage, but more on that as I learn it. I think this will be an ongoing study into the secret society of latent space. Meantime, let us now look at those screenshots and compare them. Exhibit 1. we have the original tree line, and you can see it is distillated. Compare that to this shot, which has passed through the latent workflow. Exhibit 2. We have the more original tree line, and you can see it is also distillated. Compare that to this shot, which has passed through the latent workflow. Exhibit 3. We have the village in the original clip, which is struggling with structure. Compare that to this shot, which admittedly is not a huge fix, but is as much as we can do without starting to change it too drastically that it no longer blends. If you want to see a good example of improvement, look at Exhibit 4 and observe the church. Can you guess which of these shots was the 720p latent upscale detailer version? A or B? We show that a few times just to prove the point, and I hope YouTube is helping me to do that. Assuming I even convinced you, I expect you have questions like, aren't we already working in latent space? And yes, we are, if you have a VAE encode and decode node in your workflow. But enough for today. Well, then suffice to say, I can see the value in exploring the secret society of latent space further, so I will be. And maybe you can help. Tell you what you know, tell you what you find out. Meantime, I promised I would explain the situation with VACI 2.2 and WAN 2.2 for extending video clips and why, at this time, I won't be looking further into it.
Okay.
Well, the reason is quite a simple one. I checked out the workflows required to achieve it and got this. This is complex and convoluted, and I tried them. And though they work, it would take a lot of work to get them to work for my use case. These guys are using them to make people dancing and all that TikTok type behavior. Not my bag. And I'm not willing to unravel this kind of workflow in an attempt to achieve perfect video extension. Why? Because I think, give it a few months and WAN 2.5 or some other model will give us longer clips, and once that happens I will double back and revisit the shots you see here. Or maybe not. The other reason is that I consider this time to be like the 1970s of filmmaking. Go watch a 1970s movie and you will see my point. I watched Walkabout last night, which was made in 1970 way, and honestly, it took some working out to figure what was going on with some of the film cuts. If it's good enough for the 1970s, it is good enough for me. But that is me. Maybe you'll need something more special for your film project. For me, it is time to get on. Ciao, Bambinas.
Jesus.